Hello everyone, this is JarlXL and welcome to channel Duello. Today I decided to do something different and shoot an off-meta fun video to talk about the things that are the opposite of fun in Gwent. And our topic is toxic decks. The decks that we love to hate, the decks we never want to face, and I made a top 10 list about them. I'm going to rank these decks or archetypes from the least annoying to the most, while also discussing why they're problematic and how to defend against them, and does CDPR really need to do something about them, like nerf or fix them? Well, before moving on with the list, let's define what a toxic deck is first. Well, usually winning with them feels satisfying, but you kind of feel dirty at the same time, because you know you're doing something wrong, but you also like it. So, I mean, some people have, say, naughty feelings inside them. I wouldn't call them evil, but, you know, everyone does that, so I can't blame people for playing with them. But, you know, you shouldn't always play with them, I would say. And when you play with them, you're guaranteed that you're not gonna get a GG most of the time, especially in some decks. It is kind of a rule to not give a good game against the opponent, because that is not really a good game. And at the receiving end of the spectrum is, I mean, when you play against these decks, you regret that you open up the game, and you know, you really feel awful at the end, and kind of makes you want to delete the game Gwent, which isn't really great for the game, to be honest with you. So the developers need to really balance things, you know. I mean, fun is important, but also competitive play is important. So, I mean, CDPR is mostly doing a good job about it, but I mean, there are really some problematic areas, which I'm going to talk about today, actually. But not being so critical, because I'm trying to do something fun today. And you usually cannot play your cards the way they are intended to. That's why, you know, we are frustrated playing against them. Like, you know, your cards get stolen by the opponent, which is really annoying. And sometimes there are no board space left for you to put your unit on the board, and you have to discard them, which really sucks. And sometimes your deck runs out of cards, and, well, you can't draw any cards and you can't play them. And some of the times, you know, you discard your cards because there are no targets to play them. I mean, there is no interaction on the board. And sometimes you get clogged with crappy cards. These are the situations I'm talking about. And some of the times, you know, the opposite deck is too boring and too monotonous. And I mean, you really get bored while playing against them, because the opponents keep spamming the same cards over and over and over again. There are decks like that, which is really boring. And sometimes the decks are too oppressive, and you kind of feel helpless because you have no answer to a specific card. And that card is usually a defender, which is really a bad thing, you know. I mean, you're not expected to have an answer to everything all the time. But sometimes, I mean, it all depends on whether you have the answer to a specific card or not. So winning the game shouldn't be entirely dependent on that. Okay, so after talking about these, let's rank the decks from 10 to 1. Okay, at number 10, my choice is Rat Clock decks. And by the way, I mean, this is really a personal list. I'm not a jury or anything like that. So, I mean, it's just my taste. And that's how I feel about these decks. And they kind of change depending on the meta and printing the new cards and so on. But that is the current state, and these are my choices before the next. Okay, so number 10 is Red Clock. This deck is mildly annoying. It isn't entirely, you know, horrible to play against, but I mean, the good thing is this combo is really hard to pull off. So, and we don't see these decks often. I mean, it's been at least 6 months I haven't faced a deck like this. But I mean, we didn't forget about this deck because it's really a toxic deck. What does this deck do? Well, the deck is entirely based on the winning condition, which is produce rats on the opposite side of the board for your opponent, actually. How do you do that? Well, with Noonwraith, actually. Noonwraith's Death Wish ability, produces rats for your opponent, and they are just 1-powered units. And then you can increase the number of those units with your operator, and then you can play this sacrifice cards, and then there will be a lot of rats on the opposite side of the board, and all of a sudden the opponent will not have anything to play, will not have room to play. Like, I mean, situations like this, look at this. I mean, the opponent still has 8 cards in his hand, and there's no room to play them. And this is really annoying situation. You play Gwent to play cards, and when you can't play your cards and you just discard them, it is really annoying. I mean, you should do something better. I mean, that's the feeling you get. And Glusty Orb is the finisher here. You just eat all of the 1 cards, but since that time, the opponent will keep discarding his cards. So I mean, it's too late for that. So how do you defend against this deck? Well, the most important thing is identifying which deck you're playing against. If the opponent is smart enough, they will try to hide the Noonwraith and other cards so that they're not going to play anything like that, and you can't guess what they're playing. But if the opponent is all of a sudden playing Hound on blue coin, you gotta suspect something is going on, because that's not a normal thing to do. You just play your most valuable card in the first round and on blue coin, so that is an indication that something weird is going on. So the best strategy is to get round control and then bleed out the opponent's victory condition. But it is mostly the strategy against most combo decks, actually. And when you do that, the opponent will not have anything left for the third round. So it's going to be a really easy win for you. So that was my number 10 choice. So let's move on to number 9. At number 9, I have Northern Realms Meditating Mages deck. This deck is kind of new, and fortunately we're not seeing this deck any longer. But this is still a playable deck. So, I mean... don't expect to see it because soon. I mean, because NR is really in a bad position right now in the meta. So I mean, some players may go for this route, but well, let's talk about the deck first. What does it do? I mean, why is this toxic? Well, the toxicity about this deck is the situation that I was talking before, spamming the same cards over and over again, which is the Meditating Mage. Meditating Mage is just a 3-power card, but he has bonded ability, and thanks to that, this guy gets resilience. And there are tons of cards that you can produce copies of any cards in Northern Realms, and all of a sudden you can fill the board with like 10, 12 Meditating Mages, and they all get resilience and vitality. And on top of that, you play your Tessir, and they gain resilience, and then they carry over to the next round. And then in the next round, you play your Aretusa Adepts, and Adepts get really huge because all these guys have patience on them, and all of a sudden you 2-0 the opponent. So this is a really terrible condition. And how do you defend against this? Well, you gotta have a really good first opening round hand, and the opponent will usually go down 3-4 cards less than you just to make their combo, because that's how you should play when you're playing this deck. I have never played or tried this deck because I found it too toxic to test, and which isn't really healthy for the future of the game, in my opinion. But anyhow, I mean, it is against the fundamentals of Gwent, to be honest with you. Because normally, I mean, card disadvantage is a bad thing. But in this deck, you kind of go cards down intentionally, and you get rewarded for that, which shouldn't happen. So that's why this deck is really problematic. And how do you defend against it? Well, I mean, you'll either have plenty of removal options, you know, you have to diligently, remove all of the mages, but it's not easy thing to do, and you usually don't have that kind of arsenal in your, first round hand. But if you have, yeah, definitely go for it. But if you don't have that kind of power, I mean, passing at 7 cards doesn't sound bad. The opponent will go down to 3-2 cards or something like that. You'll have huge card advantage. But if you're doing that, you gotta have a backup plan to remove these Aretuza adepts. Otherwise, they will get huge, and you're not gonna do anything about it, and again get too old despite huge card advantage. And what should CDPR do to fix this? Well, it's already been fixed in my opinion, because Meditating Mages got a nerf. And that nerfs, I mean, really decrease the power of the deck. And but as I said, it's still playable. I wish it never existed, but it exists. So they're not gonna change the card, the Meditating Mage. But I mean, CDPR needs to really think about printing resilience cards on a bronze card. That's the problem here. You can play 2 of them on bronzes. Resilience is really a critical ability. I don't think bronze cards should have that. So resilience should only be printed on gold cards, in my opinion, like immunity. I mean, they're really special, conditions. By the way, I forgot about to talk about the rat clock what to do against. I mean, to fix it. I don't think it needs fixing. It's really a meme deck. I mean, you're not gonna face that deck often. You just have to be smart and just identify that you're playing against it. But this deck is really a problem. I mean, CDPR needs to be careful about printing the future cards and keeping some of the archetypes in mind. They shouldn't print cards to encourage, these kinds of decks. And there will be more examples in the list. Okay, so number 8. Number 8 is not actually a deck. I'm gonna name it multiple Maddox. The decks that play multiple Maddox, more than one Maddox. Maddox is already an annoying card, but I mean, it's really a cool design, so it kind of changed the meta when they printed this card and then, buffed the bombs. And it is a popular card. People usually play it. Its purpose is, is to, add Maddox to your deck and, add several bombs to it. But some decks, like Nilfgaard decks, they have the option to copy Maddox with Letho. And all of a sudden you have 2 Maddox. And with your Enslave, not Enslave, but I think Imposter ability, you could actually, produce more Maddox if you can. And it's really annoying to play against, opponent will throw bombs and then plenty of Maddox will spawn on the boards. And the same thing goes for the Aracas Queen combo. Aracas Queen can consume your Maddox. You can, keep consuming Aracas Queen and then, play other cards. So, again, I mean, deck actually can have more than, 2, 3, 4, even 4 Maddox. And that is basically the victory condition of both of these decks. And as I said, I mean, it's really annoying to play against. How do you defend against it? Well, if you have the option, heat wave the first Maddox, and then we don't have a game. It's that easy. But for the overwhelming hunger, well, they have Hound and, that lab and other stuffs. They still have a chance. But for the Nilfgaard deck, I mean, I don't think there's a plan B. It's just, bombing your opponent with, a couple of Maddox and so on. So a heat wave pretty much, handles it. If you're running Squirrel, again, you can Squirrel the Maddox, one of the Maddox from the graveyard at least, so that the opponent cannot copy it or something like that. But it's really difficult to defend against. Fortunately, it's not really a strong deck. I mean, it's a tier 3 or tier 4 deck or something like that, in my opinion. But it's better than a meme deck. You could lose some games if you can't draw your cards and so on. How to fix this? Is this a problem, by the way? Yeah, it is annoying, but I don't think it's a major problem. but I still wanted to include this. I really hate playing against these decks, and I really feel great about it when I beat them. And well, as a suggestion, maybe you cannot create. I mean, there should be something like you cannot create multiple copies. I mean, maybe they can add something like ability to lethal, like copy only Nilfgaard card, or for Arrakis can copy only monsters card. They could do something like this, so they can't copy Madak. But right now it's not a big problem. But in the future, they could think about it. After printing many cards, all of a sudden some of the cards become more problematic. So and then they go back and change how that card works. It happened in the past. Okay, so that's all I wanted to talk about this archetype, or whatever it is called. Okay, at number 7, I don't have a specific deck, but it's just Nilfgaard hate, I would say. Some people just like to play some chaotic cards and have fun. To be honest with you, the cards that I want to talk about, which I consider as Nilfgaard pile, are really fun to play with them, but it feels terrible for the opponent because they mostly lose the game to RNG, like Cantarella. She is not a good card anymore. You don't know what you're drawing from your opponent's deck. I mean, she could play for something like 2 points, or you could just draw your opponent's victory condition. I don't think a card like that should exist. I really hate her. I mean, with a location, at least you knew what you were drawing. So right now it's not like that. You are not using location, Nilfgaard location, so she's a bad card. But still, some people just like to go with it. And then Wilgefortz. It's totally okay to use Wilgefortz in Hyperthin and Mill, because he's definitely compatible with what deck is trying to do, but we see Wilgefortz appearing in random Nilfgaard decks, zero, interaction with any cards. He is just there for, toll removal, but, you're rolling the dice, you don't know what the opponent's unit will be replaced with, so sometimes they just like to play him. Cohere is, I mean, he could win you the game by himself if the opponent is playing a boost heavy deck, and if they don't have answer to Cohere, they're doomed. But if you're playing against Skellige or something like that doesn't rely on boosting their units, Cohere is just a 5-point card with only 9 provisions. So it is a gamble to put cards like these. I mean, there are many more examples to this, not just these 3, random Leos or other cards, that are really good against specific decks, but they just, insert these cards to their decks. All there are really good options like Brethans, Terra Nova, I mean, Nilfgaard is really a good, solid foundation, but, some people just like to play with different cards, I guess. And finally, the bribery card. Well, this was a really one of the most hated cards about 2 years ago. Well, I don't like the RNG factor associated with the card, because out of the 3 cards that the card suggests, all could be bronzes, or you could draw a phenomenal card from your opponent's deck. But at least, I mean, you're copying a card, you're not stealing opponent's cards. But still, you get mad if the opponent finds a phenomenal card from their bribery selection. But I think cards like these should exist, but they should be limited. We don't want many cards like that. Otherwise, you should go and play other card games. I mean, Gwent is not an RNG focused game, so CD Projekt Red needs to be careful about printing RNG based cards, although they are doing it from time to time. So that's all I'm gonna talk about this number 7 slot. It's just Nilfgaard pile, cards that are thrown just randomly into the deck and hope they work. And like 3 out of 5 times they don't work, and 2 out of 5 they work, and you get happy that you get the win with a meme card. At number 6, again we have Northern Rams, and pincer maneuver leader ability, I mean, provides the players with creating these combos, I mean, without any hassles, because you could draw up to 2 cards from your deck, and it's really suitable to draw your goals. But normal, players play pincer maneuver with siege because it's really difficult to draw your siege. It's not a guaranteed card. You can't draw with your amphibious assault, so that's why it makes sense to play pincer maneuver with siege. But I mean, there are some interesting interactions, and if you can protect those interactions, you could win the game. But this is kind of a meme deck. But like 2 or 3 months ago, before I shot this video, I mean, some people were playing these Letitia and Arethusa student decks, and Letitia is the problem card here. If you can protect her with a defender, she could get out of control, and you can create huge points, and then you can replay them from your graveyard and so on. There's also the option of playing Arch Griffin and Erland combo. That also creates a lot of points, but the trick is to protect them. And Defender, Donimir of Troy, is the key card here. And how to defend against it? Wait, you gotta find the answer to Donimir. That's all it takes. If you could answer Donimir and then find somehow a way to kill Letitia, which isn't really that difficult, but it is difficult to respond to Donimir. That's the problem here. So the victory condition shouldn't be reliant on that. That's the problem I have with these decks, these pincer maneuver decks. So maybe, I mean, CDPR needs to think about doing something to defenders overall, not just NR, but the other faction defenders. And maybe, they should increase their power or increase their provision costs. So there should be somewhat a cost to playing them. I mean, I understand there should be defenders in the game to protect your engines and so on. I mean, what they did was, decreasing the provision costs of purify units. But I don't think it's enough. I mean, if you don't have them, you kind of feel helpless about it. So that's the problem with this deck. But anyway, so why is this deck toxic? Well, it sucks. I mean, the combo sucks. Again, similar to meditating mages, the opponent goes down to 3 or 4 cards less than you, and then with a single card they produce huge number, and they can again 2-0 you, and you just watch while they're doing it. I mean, and how to defend against this? I mean, other than the defender response, you should never pass against this deck. If you pass, you lose. So it is kind of an interesting deck. So that's the strategy to defend against this deck. But other than playing with defenders, what can CDPR do? Well, I think since this is a meme deck, I think it's okay. They already nerfed Letitia a bit, so I think that solved the problem. So right now, I don't think this deck is relevant. But still, I mean, with pincer maneuver ability, it is possible to do some weird things. So keep that in mind. Moving to number 5, we have the infamous Cautelus deck. Cautelus deck is actually a competitive deck. I mean, we can see it in tournaments, and I really like playing it, to be honest with you. But we have to admit that it is a horrible deck to play against because of the feeling of getting bullied by the Cautelus decks. I mean, it feels like impending doom when you're playing against them. There are just too many engines to deal with. You can't find answers to all of them. But the downside of playing with Cautelus is, you don't know your opponent's deck list when you're playing on ladder. But in the tournament, the deck lists are open, so you know what their cards, what their answer is. So you feel better about it when you're playing, your engines. That's why the deck is kind of popular. Used to be popular, at least. We don't see it that often, but who knows, it could come up again. So what's the problem with this deck other than the regret being too oppressive? Well, Calculus, I think, is a fine card. I think, I mean, it has high provision cost, and a card like that should exist in the game, in my opinion. I mean, it is really one of the most strongest engines in the game. But I mean, you can respond to it with. I mean, you can move the card, heat wave it. Maybe deal 9 damage to it, and so on. Well, if the opponent is smart, they will find a way to protect her. And but the problem with this deck is Siri Dash. Siri Dash is just too powerful card. I mean, if you protect her, she's gonna draw you a card, and you don't know what card you're drawing. It could be a 4 provision card or a 12 provision card. So the ceiling is too high with this card. But I mean, even if you draw a 4 provision card, I mean, drawing card is amazing in Gwent game. It's too important. I mean, compared to other games, card advantage is big. So Siridash provides that. Well, I mean, she has 5 power, so she's easy to deal with. But when you put this cave troll next to her, it's really difficult to deal with that, and especially with the printing of the new card, which is Sabbath. And you replay some of these cards from your graveyard. I mean, you deal with Defender in the first round. Okay, you get well, you get away with not losing your card advantage and so on. But in the second round, I mean, opponent replays that pesky Defender again, so you can't do anything about it. And again, I mean, with Calculus, you can play her twice, again with Witch's Sabbath, so that is kind of a problem. And how do you fix this? Well, how about just changing Siri Dash? I mean, she has been slightly power crap, but she's still a force to be reckoned with. I mean, even shield decks and our shield decks are using her, but it doesn't have the same impact because shield decks do not have that, powerful engines like the Carapace Calculus deck. They don't have Nithral, Beast, and so on. So she's not that big of a deal in shield wall decks, but I mean, she is a huge problem in Calculus decks. And I mean, my suggestion is, just erase this card from the game, or just modify it and do it entirely something different. I mean, we love Siri as a character, and she should be represented by another card, not this one, in my opinion. Okay, so who's the next? Number 4, Squirtle's no unit decks. Well, as you see, with each rank, we're getting more annoying decks. I mean, most of the people hate against playing no unit decks. What's the problem with these decks? Why do we consider these decks cancerous or toxic? Well, especially in the final round, this deck will not put any units on the board so that you can interact with. That's the problem with the deck. I mean, they have immunity cards. You can't just do anything to them. They have Saber-Tooth Tiger, which is actually cheating the deck editor because, I mean, this is not a unit card, but it's considered as a unit card. Again, Madoc, the new Milva edition. I mean, these are not actually units. So you have 13 limit. I mean, you can't put units less than 13, but these cards are counted as units. So actually you kind of put like 8 or 9 units in your deck, and it's not healthy for the game. In the last round, I mean, you keep discarding your cards, especially if you're playing a deck like Skellige Control or something like that. You're not going to interact with the opponent's board, so your damage cards, your point slam cards will go to waste. And what's the strategy? What's the win condition? Well, Gord is usually the win condition, but fortunately Gord has been nerfed, so the Gord doesn't become like insanely huge in these decks. But still, the deck is really a good control deck. But I wish, I mean, you could have the option of putting more units so that at least the opponent doesn't feel awful playing against you. You need to play your cards to get the fun out of the game, to enjoy the game. And this deck, doesn't provide the opponent with that. It's a shame. Because, I mean, I like control decks, but not like this. Anyway, so what can CD Projekt Red do about this? Well, I think they shouldn't keep printing cards like these, Sabertooth Tiger, Milva. I mean, they're kind of new cards compared to the Madoc. These are new additions to these decks. If they print one more card like this, yeah, I mean, things will get out of control. So they gotta stop printing cards like this. I mean, these are not unit cards, but they're, they're called unit cards in your deck builder, and which they are not actually. So hopefully, Milva was the last card that fits into the criteria. If they print another one, I mean, it's gonna be really bad. I mean, maybe when I'm talking about this, a couple of days later, at least Milva will get nerfed or something like that. Maybe with the provision, but I don't think the deck. I mean, the card works just fine. It's a really original design. I like it, but maybe the provision could be higher. Maybe. But anyway, so that's all I gotta say about these unitless decks. But with Milva, you gotta play guerrilla tactics. So you can't play Precision Strike or any other leader. At least that's the restriction with Milva. So she's only compatible with a single leader, and I'm fine with it because of that. She's not an auto-include card. But I mean, she's really great with Pincer. I mean, yeah. Why do I keep calling Pincer Maneuver? I mean, Guerrilla Tactics. So that's why everyone plays Guerrilla Tactics. So maybe they need to increase her provision cost. Okay, so we're moving to top 3. The top 3 most annoying decks in the game. At number 3, we have Nilfgaard again. So Nilfgaard fans will be really pissed off. Well, it is what it is. I mean, Nilfgaard is not a great faction to play against. And Clog is really a horrible choice. I wish this archetype didn't exist at all. Why is this problem? Well, what does this deck do, first of all? This deck, fills your deck with horrible bronze cards. I mean, at least they kind of nerfed it. They can't, put tokens in your board. I mean, they can't clog your deck with tokens at least. But still, I mean, you're getting some, bad bronze cards. Although the bronze cards in the game are better compared to last year or something like that. So it's not that bad when you get those cards. But, not drawing your golds in the game feels bad. So it's totally understandable. And I mean, I wouldn't call this archetype really strong, but it is playable. So again, it's better than a meme deck. Who's the culprit here? Well, Colgrim. But I mean, Colgrim is the ultimate victor condition if you're playing a deck based around him. So I think this card should exist. I mean, then they kind of nerfed him in the past. I don't think he needs further getting nerfed. Again, Defender seems to be a problem. You gotta have an answer to Fionn. But compared to Northern Realms version of Defenders, well, Fionn is usually played in second or third round. So by that time, you should be able to draw your answer. And you should never use your answer before you see Fionn. So at least you have some option to defend against it. So if you're a good player, you shouldn't have a problem. But I mean, if you draw really bad in the first round, if you can't draw your goals, you're pretty much screwed. So that's the downside of playing against this deck. So what can you do about it? If you're CDPR, well, they're not going to do anything about it, in my opinion. Again, similar to my other suggestions, there's enough clock cards in the game. Just don't print any longer. It's fine right now. Okay, so moving on to number 2. Freaking traps. And when I'm shooting this video, and this was the most annoying deck to play against in the meta, and I didn't put it at number 1 because number 1 choice is more annoying generally, not depending on any meta. right now, but traps is a problem with Milva and Saskia, and I think Eldain is the culprit here. I don't even want to see his face, so that's why you can only see his body in this slide. Well, what's the problem with this deck? This particular deck. Well, in this deck, I mean, let's just think about, let's just forget about Saskia first. Before Saskia, traps were always a problem, but the deck built around it wasn't particularly strong. Because, I mean, what's the victory condition here? Well, in the third round, you just play your traps and then play your Eldain and win the game. But in order to do that, you gotta win another round. So if the opponent is smart enough, they're not gonna let you do that. So the opponent will take ground control and then bleed you out of your traps. And by the way, this is the strategy that you should do against these decks. But right now, it's not easy to do because uh, the owner of the deck will play their Saskia in the first turn. It's really hard to win the round against a Saskia play. I mean, even if the opponent is playing on blue coin, they should never hesitate and play their Saskia immediately because they need to win the round. And if you can't deal with Saskia, as I said, it's not easy to do. The opponent will dry pass and then play a long round with only playing traps. And when Eldain comes into play, all of these traps turn into, Deadeye Elves, and you will have enough points to, pass the opponent. So what's the problem? Well, you can't interact with traps. That's the problem in the final round. I mean, you only have Heatwave to deal with one trap, and the opponent will play a lot of traps, and there will be no interactivity. There will be nothing on the board. You can't damage them. You can't do anything about them. It's gonna be just a guessing game. You play your card. I mean, the opponent plays a trap. You play your card and try to guess what the trap is. I mean, even if your guesses are good, and if the traps don't find as much value as the opponent hopes to, you could still lose the game. I mean, because you're losing a lot of value when you're playing your point slam cards and you're not getting enough points, no thanks to traps. And the most, important problem of all is there's no stopping Eldain. I mean, Eldain has a deploy ability, so when he comes into play, all of your traps turn into dead eyes, and the game's over. And we should have, and let's say, I mean, we should be able to deal with them. So my suggestion to fix these, traps archetype is, just nerf Eldain. I mean, change it into something else, like in order of deploy, put an order ability. Order, your turn, your traps turn into, dead eyes. So in order to do that, you have to play your Eldain a turn before the last say. And then the opponent, has reserved 6 damage, they can kill Eldain. But when you do that, the card loses tremendous value. So my suggestion is here, put a zeal condition, like other than Eldain, if there are 3 elves, or maybe including Eldain, if there are 4 elves on the board, Eldain gains zeal. So what does this mean? Maybe you need to put a couple of elves on the board so that Eldain could have zeal. But since in the last round, the opponents will be looking for units to interact with. So whenever you play a unit on the board, I mean, they're going to kill it even if it's a Hattori. I mean, so it's not ideal. So my suggestion will only make, Eldain playable with the Deadeye Ambush Leader ability. Because with Deadeye Ambush Leader ability, you put 3 elves on the board. You can still play your Eldain and, trigger your leader ability. And you could also get your Aileron out or something like that. So my suggestion is, use Eldain only with the Deadeye Ambush, so that you cannot play him with Guerrilla Tactics and Milva. I think that should solve the problem, but we'll see. So I'm really hoping for a nerf to Eldain and the Traps archetype. They're not the best Squirtle deck, by the way, but it's the most annoying deck to play against. I mean, this is really a terrible experience, terrible game experience. After playing this again, I mean, you want to move away from your screen and play something else. But if you beat these with these decks, it feels great. How do you beat this deck? Well, as I said, you gotta bleed out the traps in the second round. So in the final round, there won't be enough traps to trigger with Eldain. And if the opponent draws bad in the first round, after playing a couple of cards, maybe there will be traps remaining in his deck. So the opponent will try to avoid playing decks in the first traps in the first round. So if you could somehow manage to do that and keep the round longer, so maybe the traps will lose their value in the final round. But as I said, Sasuke is just too powerful, so it is really hard to do that. Okay, so before moving to number 1, I got some honorable mentions. I didn't put them in top 10, but they're still annoying to play against. For example, Skelliger Rain decks. The Messenger of the Sea is the problem here. I mean, there's no ceiling to this card. As long as there's rain, she keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And if you don't have an answer, especially if the opponent is playing defender, and they should, by the way, she gets out of control. I don't think a 6 provision bronze card should get so big. But fortunately, the rain archetype isn't that powerful. But I mean, in some matchups, you could definitely lose the game if you don't have answer to the defender and the messengers and so on. So it's not a meme deck at all. And we have seen this deck being played in tournaments and got some really good value. Second honorable mention is alumni spam decks. This deck was popular a month ago, but you know, with Syndicate being too powerful and the movement, you know, cards and so on, it's really to set the ends, to set your engines and get really good value from your alumni. And they're not popular. I don't think it's a toxic deck, but it's just an annoying deck to play against because the opponent will keep spamming alumni over and over again. Again, not a great gaming experience, but I wouldn't call it toxic. And another option is Alzur. Alzur is also frustrating to play against because of his RNG element. I mean, Alzur spawn, I mean, for example, for 13 provision, I mean, you could get Sunset Wonder for 1 point, and also you could get Keltulus. So it's totally RNG dependent. So that's why the orbs are kind of okay, because, you know, you spawn 2 or 3 orbs when you play him. And the 6 provision, you know, slugs are, I mean, the 6 provision, let's say, choices are really variable. I mean, there's a really low chance that you get 1 or 2 power units, but there's also, you know, 12 power, you know, 6 provision cards and so on. So it is kind of better, but still, I mean, we wouldn't want an RNG card like this. I understand it's fun. I also play him. I mean, I gotta admit, I don't think it's toxic, but again, an annoying card nonetheless. And the final honorable mention is Lippy. If I was shooting this video a year later, this Lippy would definitely be in my top 10. But right now he's kind of harmless. And Ursine Leecher leader ability is being used as it's supposed to be right now. I mean, the self-wound archetype is being played with that leader ability. With Lippy, it's, you know, why was it problematic? Well, with Lippy decks, you know, you play all your goals in the first round, and then you play your Lippy and play them again. Again, it's against the fundamentals of Gwent. I really didn't like how it was working. Fortunately, it has been power crept, so people are not playing this deck anymore. But still, don't forget about him. He's still a cancer. Okay, so let's move to number 1. I think the most annoying archetype, I would say, not deck because there are variations, is mill. Milling, What's the problem here? The problem is milling your opponent's deck, which means that the opponent will not have any cards to draw from their deck, and then they will lose the game. Well, milling or decking is a common theme in any card game. But Gwent is different. It's not a classic, combat-based card game. And there are only 25 cards in your deck. I mean, some games have 30, 40, or 60 cards. So in those, games, milling is okay because it's really hard to deplete your opponent's, library. And when you have 25 cards, it's really critical. I mean, even if you lose 4 or 5 cards, you could be really in trouble. And when milling, I mean, the cards are banished. They don't go to the graveyard. You don't have a chance to replay them. It really feels horrible. I think this is a terrible design. It shouldn't exist in Gwent. It's a shame. I mean, some people think that, okay, mill should exist in Gwent. It's fun and so on. But especially in this season, I've seen a lot of mill decks. People still playing it, and you still have a chance to win. It's not horrible, in my opinion. But you should be really knowledgeable about the mill deck, so you gotta play your cards carefully. You shouldn't thin your deck, and you should definitely get round control. And if you're on red coin, you should definitely win on even. And if you give round control to mill, you're probably going to lose the game because the opponent will keep, playing their cards and milling your deck in the second round. And in the third round, you will have nothing left in your deck and you will lose the game. So that's why winning the first round is extremely important. And when you win the round, you have two options. You could try to 2-0 the opponent because Mill really doesn't have a lot of points. All the strategies based on depleting your opponent's deck, so they don't have many points. It is really possible to 2-0 the opponent, but sometimes they have all the answers, and when you go for 2-0, you just lose your lose the remaining deck. You lose your entire library, I would say. So it is a risky choice. So you gotta trust what you have, and sometimes you could go for a dry pass. And but when you do that, there should be a lot of cards in your deck, so that keep in mind that the opponent will still keep milling your cards in the third round. But at least sometimes Kingslayer will not give a lot of value in the final round. So what I'm trying to say is, it's not an easy deck to defend against, and you gotta feel really lucky. So if you have again a good opening hand, I mean, for example, you're playing a Gord deck, so if you have Gord, it feels much better because there's a high chance that your victory condition will get milled out of your deck. So well, it is really toxic. You should never GG any player who's playing mill. And I could go further and say that, I mean, players who play mill have some issues in their life. I mean, okay, it's fun, but it's fun to play mill and get victory against the opponent. But I mean, you should do it in unranked casual play or something like that. It's really toxic to play this in in the ladder. I mean, you just enjoy the horrible position that your opponent's in. I don't think you should do that. It's not a good feeling, in my opinion. It's like someone trips and fall and you laugh at him. It is similar to that, in my opinion. Maybe I'm just being too harsh or critical about this. I just hate mill, but I love mill in other card games, so keep that in mind. It's just not good for Gwent. What can CDPR do about this? Nothing, because they don't see this as a problem. Especially with the addition of teleportation, the deck has become more popular, unfortunately. Again, I'm gonna do the same warning for some of the previous decks that I talked about. Just do not print any more mill cards. or any cards that encourage mill, like teleportation, mata. I mean, especially Matahuri. I mean, she was a great card. She used to be. I mean, you draw your highest provision card, and the opponent draws their lowest provision card. She used to be really great in most of the decks, but she has been power creep. But now, unfortunately, she's only being used in mill decks because you kind of cheat the game. I mean, the opponent doesn't have any cards to draw, so you play your Mata, they draw nothing. So maybe they could change the card stacks or something like that to prevent that from happening. It shouldn't exist. Anyhow, so that was my frustration about this deck. This was again an off meta video, as I said in the beginning. So I talk about the things that are unfun in Gwent. Hope you like this. I mean, I just want to rank things, create top 10, top 20 lists. So why not do it on YouTube? I mean, I have different tastes as well, other than card games. I like to rank other games, music, movies, TV series, books, and so on. But the YouTube channel is only for Gwent right now. I really don't want to get into my other hobbies in YouTube. So far, I don't want to do that. But I mean, it is what it is. I hope you like what I did here today. If you did so, don't forget to hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please feel free to do so. So I'm trying to upload content for every other day, about 3 or 4 videos per week. So see you on another Duello video. Bye bye.